Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hash Global Leadership Conversation 1, one of many. With me today is Ed Gillcrist, all the way from Denver, Colorado. He showed me his I almost said farm, but ranch outside, or lovely green pastures where the horses, where they ride their horses. So it's been wonderful to chat to him. But today he's from the Shackleton group. They do leadership development, have for many years. He's got a Marine Corps background, and he's put that to good use for developing leaders in today's difficult world. But our Hash Global Leadership Conversation 1 is today with Ed. Ed, welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Adrian. It's great to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this.
So let's get your voice out there in the universe with our two standard questions that we've asked from New York to London to South Africa to all over the world so far. Is what is the most important quality or attribute we need to develop or awaken or improve in leaders if we are going to turn around the global leadership crisis?
I think probably the first thing I would preface that with, Adrian, is that based on each of our own experience, if I walked into a room and asked a group of people, a group of leaders, how they would describe or define leadership, probably 80% of the definition or description that we come up with is going to be very, very similar. But that 20% that we want to tap into people is based on our own experience, right? I mean, we are victims or subject, if you'd rather, of our own experience. And some of that is that 20% is what's so important, and it's based on our experience. Shackleton, after a couple of failed attempts at the pole and some very severe, under very severe conditions, all of that shaped his approach towards leadership, probably different than that of Robert Falcon Scott, where people died. And under very similar circumstances, Shackleton ended up being in a similar circumstance, but he didn't lose any of his folks, probably because of those previous experiences. So for me, the experience that element or that component of leadership that I think needs to be really developed and is missing or is just not as effective to me as it seems it used to be, certainly not after I've left the Marine Corps, is this ability of our leaders to both understand and willingness to exercise their authority. So exercising folks' authority is a very, very critical element of leadership because it's at the heartbeat of what we do every day. Part of that, and one of the things that tends to stand out probably as an example for folks of what I mean by exercising your authority would be, we see younger folks and younger leaders that are developing nowadays have a challenge with making tough decisions. And that's just one of many elements of exercising your authority. But essentially, exercising your authority is the ability to maintain that authority when it's appropriate, delegate it when you need to, but naturally, because of your position, to retain it all the time. I think that there's an abundance of examples of exercising your authority, whether it's telling people what to do, whether it's getting them to drive and find the solutions for what we're looking at, understanding what the boundaries are and how far they can go, is really impedes people's willingness, moral courage, if you will, to exercise that authority. So there's obviously, you could have a month-long seminar on that topic alone, but I think that's the element that's missing and probably needs to be developed most in our people.
So the ability to exercise authority, that's a very interesting one, because, when you have a position of power, you could exercise that authority for wrong reasons, for
right
reasons. But but that is a very interesting one. I know you kind of answered it, but I do follow up with a why. Why do you put that one at the top? Why not good communicators? Why not values? Why not personal character? You know, there's so much you can mention, and they're all important probably. But
Sure.
So Ed, why is this one at the very top of your list?
Again, I think it has to do with my experience and where I come from. For you, for others, there are things that stand out because they're challenges that you experience. And those are the things, again, victims are subjects of our experience. Certain things become very important. In the environment I grew up in, I had this idea that decisive leadership was all about making quick decisions and exercising your authority quickly. And I've learned, obviously, as I've gotten older, that exercising your authority and being decisive isn't about rapid decisions, but it's about timely, appropriate, as John Cleese likes to say, using the time you've been given instead of being lazy, and making the decision with the appropriate amount of information. But exercising your authority, if you don't do it, and it's on your shoulders, if you're the one wearing the mantle of leadership, it's an obligation. If you can't accept that obligation, you should not accept the mantle of leadership that goes with it. And so that's why I think it's so important, is everything that happens around you in your role as a leader is 100% dependent on your ability and willingness to exercise your authority appropriately, right, for good reasons, so that your mission can be executed, so that I can develop a strategy, so that I can build a product and service oriented structure, that I can develop my people effectively, and lead my organization to achieve the results we set out to. If I don't exercise my authority, if only 1% or 5% of the leaders in the organization don't exercise their authority effectively, then the organization has an exponential potential outcome for not achieving its results. So, and at the end of the day, I think it's not about the individual, it's about the organization that we're a part of. Because I just don't lead alone. I lead people, and I lead my organization. So that's why I think it's the most important thing. And I've seen both in the military sector and in the civilian sector, when authority isn't exercised, the potential for bad results becomes much higher.
Okay. Ed, now the big question is, how do you develop, awaken, improve this quality of the ability to exercise authority in leaders? So we take them on programs, we coach them, we work with them. Ultimately, how do you get me, if I'm not good at exercising my authority, how do you get me to do that? What is the process? Is there a simple formula for that?
I don't know that it's a simple formula per se, but let me give you an example of, I think it has to deal with developing our individuals, what we refer to as practical proficiency. And here's an example. In the military, there's a very common phrase that we refer to as an individual, a Marine's technical and tactical proficiency. The difference between those two things is this. A Marine's tactical proficiency or technical proficiency is he's got a rifle, and he knows how to take that rifle apart and put it back together and clean it. And he knows how to load a round in the chamber and point down range and fire the rifle and hit a target. He knows how to do all that, and he can do it blindfolded. That's technical proficiency. His tactical proficiency is that Marine, his or her ability to employ that skill, employ that proficiency in the environment for which it was intended. So we spend as leaders and in organizations a lot of time training people technically. We go teach them how to type. We go teach them how to be engineers. We send them to the right schools. But now I put that engineer in the environment which he needs to employ those skills. And it's more than just being an engineer. The example my buddy uses all the time is, for the difference between that is, let's translate that just a little bit to technical and practical proficiency for the corporate environment rather than the military environment. I'm out on my ranch. My daughter's driving with grandpa. She's 13 years old. And Grandpa's driving his big old F-150 truck from 1965, and he says, "Hey, honey, you want to drive?" And she says, "Sure." So she slides over into the driver's seat. He says, "The steering wheel helps you miss trees and horses. The pedal on the right makes you go faster. The pedal on the left makes you go slower or stop." And that's it. So she's driving around and she's missing cows and trees, and she's having a big time. She knows she's got the technical proficiency to operate the vehicle. Now pick her up and put her in the middle of New York City in that same vehicle.
Yeah.
It's the steering wheel still does what it's supposed to do, makes the thing go left and right, and the pedal on the right still makes it go faster and the left stops. But it's a much more complex environment, and we have to develop that. My daughter now needs Grandpa sitting next to you or me sitting next to our daughters or our kids saying, "That's what the stop sign means. That's what these things are. You got to look for people." We have to develop that in our people. So when our people come to the organization, it's not just about mentoring and coaching. It's about developing that skill and so that they can learn to exercise their authority. Ways to do that would be give them the opportunity to just not participate in developing a brief to higher headquarters or to your bosses or to a parent organization. Let them actually brief part of it, right? When they come to you and they ask you for a decision, because making tough decisions is one of those elements that's really hard to develop in your people, and it's all about exercising your authority. When they come into your organization, make them tell you what those courses of action should be. What would you do? How would you do that? It takes a little longer, but down the road, they end up coming to you. They start making those decisions because they know, hey, my boss is just going to say, "What would you do?" I'm going to offer him some solutions. He's going to say, "Okay, I agree." It's not to say that you're abrogating your authority in any way and not allowing them to come, but you want to reduce that amount of time. One of the other things I think that's absolutely critical to developing that skill is establishing and explaining what your clear expectations of your people are and of your peer leaders that you work with. What are your capabilities? What do I need to do? What do I expect of my people? And the great example about expectations and how important that is that playground analogy from years ago where they did a study, and there were two types of playgrounds. There were playgrounds that had fences around them and playgrounds that didn't. The two common denominators in all types of playgrounds was there was a jungle gym apparatus in the middle and they had kids. On the playgrounds that didn't have a fence around them, all the kids tend to play and congregate around the jungle gym. In the place where there was a fence, in the playgrounds that had fences, those kids played all over the place, out by the fence, near the fence, on the apparatus, in the yard. The conclusions they draw and we draw as leaders and organizational developers from that is the clearer the expectations are, the more likely your people are to push towards those limits or those expectations. All those kids played around the jungle gym because they thought that was the limit of where they could go. Their authority was limited by that apparatus. But when there's a fence out there, you've got a much higher likelihood that they say, "Okay, that's a fence. I'm allowed to go to that." We as leaders need to take that fence and move it out a little bit, just beyond maybe their capability, stretch their willingness. And then you start seeing who goes to that fence and who doesn't. And you begin to develop those who will go in the appropriate manner, and those that aren't, you need to maybe push them a little more. Those are some examples. And those are the types of things I think we can do to create a culture of leadership in your organization where leadership tends to transfer more seamlessly to folks who have the best situational awareness and can get the team where they need to go, as opposed to just the person that's wearing the rank or the mantle of official leadership. Does that answer the question, Adrian?
Yes, Ed Gillcrist, thank you so much. I mean, some really practical things coming from your perspective and your background, which I find fascinating. It's one of the different interviews I've had in terms of that expectation, the capability to exercise your authority. I really appreciate that. And then some practical ways of how to develop that. And we appreciate you putting your voice out there in the universe. This is # Global Leadership Conversation 1. we're looking at future conversations based on the results from all these conversations. And we appreciate you all the way from Denver, Colorado in the US. We value your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate it. This was a great opportunity.